chasm of foam and yellow sands. Beyond, red roofs above a narrow wharf in cluster. Then a moulded church. And higher, a long street climbs to one tall towered mill. And high in heaven behind it, a grey down with Danish barrows, and a hazelwood flourishes green in a cup-like hollow of the down. Here, on this beach, 200 years ago, 3 children of 3 houses. Annie Lee, the prettiest little damsel in the port, and Philip Ray, the miller's only son, and Enoch Arden, a rough sailor's lad, made orphan by a winter shipwreck, played among the waste and lumber of the shore, and built their castles of dissolving sand to watch them overflow, or following up and flying the white breaker, daily left the little footprint, daily washed away. A narrow cave ran in beneath the cliff. In this, the children played at keeping house. Enoch was host one day, Philip the next, while Annie still was mistress. But at times, Enoch would hold possession for a week. "This is my house, and this my little wife." "Mine too," said Philip, "turn and turn about." When, if they quarrelled, Enoch, stronger made, was master, then would Philip, his blue eyes all flooded with the helpless wrath of tears, shriek out, "I hate you, Enoch!" And at this, the little wife would weep for company and pray them not to quarrel for her sake, and say she would be little wife to both. When the dawn of rosy childhood passed, and a new warmth of life's ascending sun was felt by either fixed his heart on that one girl. And Enoch spoke his love, but Philip loved in silence. And the girl seemed kinder unto Philip than to him, but she loved Enoch, though she knew it not, and would, if asked, deny it. Enoch set a purpose evermore before his eyes, to hoard all savings to the uttermost, to purchase his own boat, and make a home for Annie. And so prospered, that at last a luckier or a bolder fisherman, a carefuller in peril, did not breathe for leagues along that breaker-beaten coast than Enoch. Likewise, he served a year on board a merchantman, and made himself full sailor. And he thrice had plucked a life from the dread sweep of the downstreaming seas, and all men looked upon him favourably. And ere he touched his 21st May, he purchased his own boat, and made a home for Annie, neat and nest-like, halfway up the narrow street that clambered toward the mill. Then, on a golden autumn eventide, the younger people making holiday with bag and sack and basket, great and small, went nutting to the hazels. Philip stayed, his father lying sick and needing him, climbed the hill, just where the prone edge of the wood began to feather toward the hollow, he saw the pair. Enoch and Annie sitting hand in hand, his large grey eyes and weather-beaten face all kindled by a still and sacred fire that burned as on an altar. Philip looked, and in their eyes and faces read his doom. And then, as their faces drew together, it groaned and slipped aside, and like a wounded life crept down into the hollows of the wood, there, while the rest loud in merry-making had his dark hour unseen. And rose and passed, bearing a lifelong hunger in his heart. So these were wed, and merrily rang the bells, and merrily ran the years, 7 happy years of health and competence and mutual love and honourable toil, with children, first a daughter. In him woke, with his first babe's first cry, the noble wish to save all earnings to the uttermost, and give his child a better bringing up than his had been or hers. A wish renewed, when 2 years after came a boy to be the rosy idol of her solitudes, while Enoch was abroad on wrathful seas. Then came a change, as all things human change. 10 miles to northward of the narrow port opened a larger haven. Thither used Enoch at times to go by land or sea. And once when there, and clambering on a mast in harbour, by mischance he slipped and fell. A limb was broken when they lifted him, and while he lay recovering there, his wife bore him another son, a sickly one. And on Enoch fell, lying thus inactive, doubt and gloom. He seemed, as in a nightmare of the night, to see his children leading ever more low, miserable lives of hand to mouth, and her he loved a beggar. Then he prayed, save them from this, whatever comes to me. And while he prayed, the master of that ship Enoch had served him, hearing his mischance, came, for he knew the man and valued him, reporting of a vessel China bound and wanting yet a boatswain. Would he go? There yet were many weeks before she sailed from this port. Would Enoch have the place? And Enoch all at once assented to it, rejoicing at that answer to his prayer. Then, first since Enoch's golden ring had girt her finger, Annie fought against his will, besought him, supplicating, if he cared for her or his dear children, not to go. He, not for his own self-caring, but her and her children, let her plead in vain, so grieving, held his will, and bore it through. Annie, this voyage, by the grace of God, will bring fair weather yet to all of us. Come, Annie, come. Cheer up before I go. At length she spoke. Enoch, you are wise, and yet for all your wisdom, well know I that I shall look upon your face no more. Well then, said Enoch, I shall look on yours. Annie, the ship I sail in passes here, he named the day. Get you a seaman's glass, spy out my face, and laugh at all your fears. But when the last of those last moments came, Annie, my girl, cheer up, Be comforted, look to the babes. Until I come again, keep everything shipshape, for I must go. And fear no more for me. Or, if you fear, cast all your cares on God. That anchor holds. Is he not yonder in those uttermost parts of the morning? If I flee to these, can I go from him? And the sea is his. The sea is his. He made it. Enoch rose, cast his strong arms about his drooping wife, and kissed his wonder-stricken little ones, but for the third, sickly one, who slept after a night of feverish wakefulness. When Annie would have raised him, Enoch said, "Wake him not, let him sleep. How should this child remember this?" and kissed him in his cot. But Annie, from her baby's forehead, clipped a tiny curl and gave it. This he kept through all his future. But now, hastily caught his bundle, waved his hand, and went his way. When the day that Enoch mentioned came, borrowed a glass, but all in vain. Perhaps she could not fix the glass to suit her eye. Perhaps her eye was dim, hand tremulous. She saw him not, and while he stood on deck waving, the moment and the vessel passed. Even to the last dip of the vanishing sail she watched it, and departed, weeping for him. Though she mourned his absence as his grave, set her sad will no less to chime with his, gained for her own a scanty sustenance, and lived a life of silent melancholy. Now, the third child was sickly born, and grew yet sicklier, though the mother cared for it with all a mother's care. Nevertheless, whether her business often called her from it, or through the want of what it needed most, or means to pay the voice who best could tell what most it needed, howsoe'er it was, after a lingering, ere she was aware, like the caged bird escaping suddenly, the innocent soul flitted away. In that same week, when Annie buried her babe, Philip's true heart, which hungered for her peace, since Enoch left he had not looked upon her, smote him as having kept aloof so long. "Surely," said Philip, "I may see her now, may be some little comfort." Therefore went, passed through the solitary room in front, paused for a moment at an inner door, then struck it thrice, and no one opening, entered. any human face, but turned her own towards the wall and wept. Then Philip, standing up, said falteringly, "Annie, I came to ask a favour of you. I came to speak to you of what he wished, Enoch, your husband. And wherefore did he go this weary way and leave you lonely, not to see the world for pleasure, nay, but for the wherewithal to give his babes a better bringing up than his had been or yours? So, Annie, now, have we not known each other all our lives? I do beseech you by the love you bear him and his children not to say me nay. For if you will, when Enoch comes again, why then he shall repay me. If you will, Annie, for I am rich and well-to-do. Now let me put the boy and girl to school. This is the favour that I came to ask." Then Annie, with her brows against the wall, answered, "I cannot look you in the face. I seem so foolish and so broken down. When you came in, my sorrow broke me down, and now I think your kindness breaks me down." And Philip asked, "Then you will let me, Annie?" Then she turned. She rose and fixed her swimming eyes upon him, then calling down a blessing on his head, caught at his hand and wrung it passionately, and passed into the little yard beyond. So lifted up in spirit, he moved away. Then Philip put the boy and girl to school, and bought them needful books, and every way, like one who does his duty by his own, made himself theirs. But Philip was her children's all in all. From distant corners of the street they ran to greet his hearty welcome heartily, and called him Father Philip. Philip gained as Enoch lost. For Enoch seemed to them uncertain as a vision or a dream, faint as a figure seen in early dawn, down at the far end of an avenue, going we know not where. And so 10 years since Enoch left his hearth and native land fled forward. And no news of Enoch came. It chanced one evening, Annie's children longed to go with others nutting to the wood, and Annie would go with them. Then they begged for Father Philip, as they called him too. He laughed, and yielding readily to their wish, for was not Annie with them, and they went. But after scaling half the weary down, just where the prone edge of the wood began to feather toward the hollow, all her force failed her, and sighing, "Let me rest," she said. So Philip rested with her, well content, while all the younger ones with jubilant cries broke from their elders, and tumultuously down through the whitening hazels made a plunge to the bottom, and dispersed, and bent or broke the lithe, reluctant boughs to tear away their tawny clusters, crying to each other and calling here and there about the wood. But Philip, sitting at her side, forgot her presence, and remembered one dark hour here in this wood, when like a wounded life he crept into the shadow. At last he said, lifting his honest forehead, "Listen, Annie, how merry they are down yonder in the wood. Tired, Annie?" For she did not speak. coming somewhat closer, spoke. Annie, there is a thing upon my mind, and it has been upon my mind so long that though I know not when it first came there, I know that it will out at last. Oh, Annie, it is beyond all hope, against all chance, that he who left you 10 long years ago should still be living. Well then, let me speak. I grieve to see you poor and wanting help. I cannot help you as I wish to do, unless they say that women are so quick. But perhaps you know what I would have you know. I wish you for my wife. I fain would prove a father to your children. I do think they love me as a father. I am sure that I love them as if they were my own. And I believe, if you will fast my wife, that after all these sad, uncertain years, we might still be as happy as God grants to any of his creatures. Think upon it, for I am well-to-do, no kin, no care, no burden save my care for you and yours. And we have known each other all our lives. And I have loved you longer than you know. Then answered Annie. Tenderly she spoke. You have been as God's good angel in our house. God bless you for it. God reward you for it, Philip, with something happier than myself. Can one love twice? Can you be ever loved as Enoch was? Or what is it that you ask? I am content, he answered, to be loved a little after Enoch. Oh, she cried, scared as it were. Dear Philip, wait a while. If Enoch comes, oh, but Enoch will not come yet. Wait a year. A year is not so long. Surely I shall be wiser in a year. Or wait a little. Philip sadly said, Annie, as I have waited all my life, I well may wait a little. Nay, she cried, I am bound. You have my promise. In a year. Will you not bide your year as I bide mine? And Philip answered, I will bide my year. She spoke. And in one moment, as it were, while yet she went about her household ways, even as she dwelt upon his latest words that he had loved her longer than she knew, that autumn into autumn flashed again. And there he stood once more before her face, claiming her promise. Is it a year? She asked. Yes, if the nuts, he said, be ripe again. Come out and see. But she put him off. So much to look to, such a change. A month. Give her a month. She knew that she was bound. A month, no more. And then Philip, with his eyes full of that lifelong hunger and his voice shaking a little like a drunkard's hand. Take your own time, Annie. Take your own time. And Annie could have wept for pity of him. And yet she held him on delayingly, with many a scarce believable excuse, trying his truth and his long sufferance, till half another year had slipped away. At last, one night, it chanced that Annie could not sleep, but earnestly prayed for a sign. My Enoch, is he gone? Then, compassed round by the blind wall of night, started from bed and struck herself a light. Then desperately seized the holy book, suddenly set it wide to find a sign, suddenly put her finger on the text, under a palm tree. That was nothing to her. No meaning there. She closed the book and slept. And lo, her Enoch, sitting on a height, under a palm tree, over him the gone, she thought. He is happy. He is singing Hosanna in the highest, yonder shining the sun of righteousness. And these be paths whereof the happy people strowing cried, Hosanna in the highest. Here she woke, resolved, sent for Philip, and said wildly to him, there is no reason why we should not wed. Then for God's sake, he answered, for both our sakes you will wed me, let it be at once. So these were wed, and merrily rang the bells, and they were wed. But never merrily beat Annie's heart. A footstep seemed to fall beside her path, she knew not whence. A whisper on her ear, she knew not what. Nor loved she to be left alone at home, nor ventured out alone. What ailed her then, that ere she entered, often her hand dwelt lingeringly on the latch, fearing to enter. Philip thought he knew. Such doubts and fears were common to her state, being with child. But when her child was born, then her new child was as herself renewed. Then the new mother came about her heart. Then her good Philip was her all in all. And that mysterious instinct wholly died. Enoch prosperously sailed the ship Good Fortune, though at setting forth the Biscay, roughly ridging eastward, shook and almost overwhelmed her, yet unvexed, she slipped across the summer of the world till silent in her oriental haven. There, Enoch traded for himself and bought quaint monsters for the market of those times, a gilded dragon also for the babes. Less lucky her home voyage. At first, indeed, through many a fair sea circle, day by day, scarce rocking, her full-busted figurehead stared o'er the ripple feathering from her bows. Then followed calms, and then winds variable, then baffling a long course of them, and at last storm, such as drove her under moonless heavens till hard upon the cry of breakers came the crash of ruin and the loss of all but Enoch and two others. Half the night, buoyed upon floating tackle and broken spars, these drifted, stranding on an isle at morn, rich but loneliest in a lonely sea. No want was there of human sustenance, soft fruitage, mighty nuts and nourishing roots, nor, save for pity, was it hard to take the helpless life so wild that it was tame. There, in a seaward-gazing mountain gorge, they built and thatched with leaves of palm a hut, half native cavern. So the three, set in this Eden of all plenteousness, dwelt with eternal summer, ill content. was gone, the two remaining found a fallen stem, and Enoch's comrade, careless of himself, fire-hollowing this in Indian fashion, fell sun-stricken, and that other lived alone. In those two deaths he read God's warning. Wait. The mountain wooded to the peak, the lawns and winding glades high up like waves to heaven, the slender cocoa's drooping crown of plumes, the lightning flash of insect and of bird, the lustre of the long convolvuluses that coiled around the stately stems and ran even to the limit of the land, the glows and glories of the broad belt of the world, all these he saw. But what he fain had seen, he could not see. The kindly human face, nor ever hear a kindly voice, but heard the myriad shriek of wheeling ocean fowl, the league-long roller thundering on the reef, the moving whisper of huge trees that branched and blossomed in the zenith, or the sweep of some precipitous rivulet to the wave, as down the shore he ranged, or all day long sat often in the seaward-gazing gorge, a shipwrecked sailor waiting for a sail. No sail from day to day. But every day the sunrise broken into scarlet shafts among the palms and ferns and precipices, the blaze upon the waters to the east, the blaze upon his island overhead, the blaze upon the waters to the west. Then the great stars that globed themselves in heavens, the hollower belling ocean, and again the scarlet shafts of sunrise. But no sail. There, often as he watched, or seemed to watch, so still, the golden lizard on him paused. A phantom made of many phantoms moved before him, haunting him, or he himself moved haunting people, things, and places known far in a darker isle beyond the line. The babes, their babble, Annie, the small house, the climbing street, the mill, the leafy lanes, the peacock yew tree, the horse he drove, the boat he sold, the chill November dawns and dewy glooming dawns, the gentle shower, the smell of dying leaves, and the low moan of leaden-coloured seas. Once, likewise, in the ringing of his ears, though faintly merrily, far and far away, he heard the pealing of his parish bells. Then, though he knew not wherefore, started up, shuddering, and when the beauteous, hateful isle returned upon him, had not his poor heart spoken with that which, being everywhere, lets none who speaks with him seem all alone? Surely the man had died of solitude. Thus, over Enoch's early silvering head, the sunny and rainy seasons came and went year after year. His hopes to see his own and pace the sacred old familiar fields not yet had perished, when his lonely doom came suddenly to an end. Another ship, she wanted water, blown by baffling winds like the good fortune from her destined course, stayed by this isle, not knowing where she lay. they sent a crew that landing burst away in search of stream or fount and filled the shores with clamour. Downward from his mountain gorge stepped the long-haired, long-bearded solitary, brown, looking hardly human, strangely clad, and there the tale he uttered brokenly, scarce credited at first, but more and more amazed and melted all who listened to it. And clothes they gave him, and free passage home, even in that harbour whence he'd sailed before. Down to the pool and narrow wharf he went, seeking a tavern which of old he knew, a front of timber-crossed antiquity, so propped, worm-eaten, ruinously old, he thought it must have gone. But he was gone who kept it, and his widow, Miriam Lane, with daily dwindling profits, held the house. There Enoch rested silently many days. But Miriam Lane was good and garrulous, nor let him be, but often breaking in, told him, with other annals of the port, not knowing Enoch was so brown, so bowed, so broken, all the story of his house, his baby's death, her growing poverty, how Philip put the little ones to school and kept them in it, his long wooing her slow consent, and marriage, and the birth of Philip's child, and o'er his countenance no shadows part, nor motion. Anyone regarding well had deemed he felt the tale less than the teller. Only when she closed, Enoch, poor man, was cast away and lost. He, shaking his grey head pathetically, repeated, muttering, cast away and lost. Again, in deeper inward whispers, lost. But Enoch yearned to see her face again. If I might look on her sweet face again and know that she is happy. So the thought haunted and harassed him and drove him forth to the rear of Philip's house. And Enoch stole up by the wall and saw. For cups and silver on the burnished board sparkled and shone, so genial was the hearth. And on the right hand of the hearth he saw Philip, the slighted suitor of old times, stout, rosy, with his babe across his knees, and o'er her second father stooped a girl, a later but a loftier Annie Lee, fair-haired and tall, and from her lifted hand dangled a length of ribbon and a ring to tempt the babe, who reared his creasy arms, caught at and ever missed it, and they laughed. And on the left hand of the hearth he saw the mother, glancing often toward her babe, but turning now and then to speak with him, her son, who stood beside her tall and strong, and saying that which pleased him, for he smiled. Now, when the dead man come to life beheld his wife no more, and the babe hers, yet not his, upon the father's knee, and all the warmth, the peace, the happiness, and his own children, tall and beautiful, and him, that other, reigning in his place, lord of his rights and of his children's love. Then he, though Miriam Lane had told him all, because things seen are mightier than things heard, staggered and shook, holding the branch, and feared to send abroad a shrill and terrible cry, which in one moment, like the blast of doom, would shatter all the happiness of the heart. He, therefore, turning softly like a thief, lest the harsh shingle should grate underfoot, and feeling all along the garden wall, lest he should swoon and tumble and be found, crept to the gate and opened it, and closed as lightly as a sick man's chamber door behind him, and came out upon the waste. And there he would have knelt, but that his knees were feeble, so that falling prone he dug his fingers into the wet earth and prayed. they take me thence? O God Almighty, blessed Saviour, thou that didst uphold me on my lonely isle, uphold me, Father, in my loneliness a little longer. Aid me, give me strength not to tell her, never to let her know. Help me not to break in upon her peace. My children too, must I not speak to these? They know me not. I should betray myself. Never. No father's kiss for me. The girl so like her mother. And the boy, my son. There, speech and thought and nature failed a little, and he lay tranced. But when he rose and paced back toward his solitary home again, all down the long and narrow street, he went beating it in upon his weary brain, as though it were the burden of a song, not to tell her, never to let her know, not to tell her, never to let her know, never. He was not all unhappy. His resolve upbore him, and firm faith, and evermore prayer from a living source within the will, and beating up through all the bitter world like fountains of sweet water in the sea, kept him a living soul. Yet, since he did but labour for himself, work without hope, there was not life in it whereby a man could live. And as the year rolled itself round again to meet the day when Enoch had returned, a languor came upon him, gentle sickness, gradually weakening the man till he could do no more, death dawning on him, and the close of all. For through that dawning gleamed a kindlier hope on Enoch, thinking, after I am gone, then may she learn I loved her to the last. He called aloud for Miriam Lane and said, Woman, I have a secret. Only swear before I tell you, swear upon the book not to reveal it till you see me dead. Dead, clamoured the good woman. Hear him talk. I warrant, man, that we shall bring you round. Swear, added Enoch sternly, on the book. And on the book, half frighted, Miriam swore. Then Enoch, rolling his grey eyes upon her, did you know Enoch Arden of this town? Know him, she said. I knew him far away. I mind him coming down the street, held his head high and cared for no man, he. Slowly, sadly, Enoch answered her. His head is low, and no man cares for him. I think I have not 3 days more to live. I am the man. Know you that I am he who married married her who married Philip Ray. Sit, listen. Then he told her of his voyage, his wreck, his lonely life, his coming back, his gazing in on Annie, his resolve and how he kept it. As the woman heard, fast flowed the current of her easy tears, saying only, "Sing your bands before you go. Let me fetch them, Arden," and arose, eager to bring them down. For Enoch hung a moment on her words, and then replied, "Woman, disturb me not now at the last, but let me hold my purpose till I die. Sit down again, mark me, and understand while I have power to speak. I charge you now, when you shall see her, tell her that I died blessing her, praying for her, loving her, save for the bar between us, loving her as when she laid her head beside my own. And tell my daughter Annie, whom I saw so like her mother, that my latest breath was spent in blessing her and praying for her. And tell my son that I died blessing him, and say to Philip that I blessed him too. He never meant us anything but good. But if my children care to see me dead, who hardly knew me living, let them come. I am their father. But she must not come, for my dead face would vex her after life. And now there is but one of all my blood who will embrace me in the world to be. This hair is his. She cut it off and gave it, and I have borne it with me all these years, and thought to bear it with me to my grave. But now my mind is changed, for I shall see him, my babe in bliss. Wherefore, when I am gone, give her this, for it may comfort her. It will, moreover, be a token to her that I am he. Then the third night after this, while Enoch slumbered motionless and pale, there came so loud a calling of the sea that all the houses in the haven rang. He woke, he rose, and he spread his arms abroad, crying with a loud voice, "A sail! A sail! I am saved!" And so fell back and spoke